So not too long ago I've been posting clips of F.E.A.R, which is a 2005 game. For me this was my first ever playthrough of the game. Not to say I'd not heard of it back then in 2005, but I just never got around to playing it. So I think it would be fair to say that I'm looking at this game from a fresh perspective, not shaped by any past nostalgia. Just to give a bit of background to this game, it came out in 2005 as I mentioned before. It was developed by Monolith Studios for Xbox 360, PS3 and Windows. Now, in terms of gameplay, what you could summarize it is that it's obviously a first-person bullet time game. On the surface, that's what it is. But as I will explain further in this video, there's more going on to this game than just that. Although yes, this is the main mechanic for which the rest of the game revolves around. But back to the bullet time or slow-mo aspect of the game mechanics, however you want to put it. Initially what comes to mind is a game like Max Payne. However, given the FPS nature of the game, F.E.A.R, bullet time or slow-mo time works and is employed in a different manner. This offers a different gameplay experience when using this mechanic. You see, unlike with a game like Max Payne, you don't have the free camera movement and leaping in whatever direction that comes with a third-person perspective. This means that, unlike F.E.A.R, you're able to approach enemies in a number of different ways. This also gave Max Payne a cinematic quality to the bullet time. Not to say there isn't the same stylistic flair and rage, it just happens less frequently or in a more subtle way than in a game like Max Payne. So in F.E.A.R, the slow-mo mechanic to me is more of a tool than anything else. So for example, to have the ability to activate and use cover more than you would in a game like Max Payne. Or to be able to come around a corner in slow-mo, which gives another different type of tactic when attacking the enemy. Again, this game gives different ways to approach enemies using the slow-mo mechanic. As with a game like Max Payne, this ability has a meter, so how and when you use it is a factor. Now in between the shooting there'll be instances of puzzles in terms of getting around obstacles and finding switches. This thankfully doesn't intrude too much on the shooting aspect of the gameplay. Similar to Max Payne, the game is somewhat plot driven. This comes in the form of radio conversations and messages found on answering machines. Interactions with NPCs as well as some limited in-game cutscenes. There's nothing too immersive, but it works in my opinion. Now, where with Max Payne becoming almost iconic because of its narration and plot, F.E.A.R seems to have become very iconic in terms of its mood and tone, and almost horror setting that it created. To me, the game being able to set the mood and scary tone is something that really shines for me and stands out, more so because this is the first time playing the game, and the game was made nearly 20 years ago. Things such as the appearance of the little girl in the game periodically have almost become iconic to the game. I would say that the success of this aspect of the game comes down to things such as pacing, art direction, voiceover, music, etc. Which leads to me again emphasizing the power of these elements over things such as, say, mere graphic fidelity. Level design is based in some way on real life places, but in other ways is somewhat abstract. The other way I would put it is that the gameplay has shaped the level design, rather than a complete mirroring of a real environment, and fitting the gameplay within that. Here what I notice is the way the level design aids to the exploration. There are sometimes multiple paths which add to the feeling of exploration. It also adds to the combat in terms of being able to outflank the enemies, which in turn they can do to you. A small degree of exploration is aided by the need to collect health and armor. Again, carrying on from classic FPS games and not using the regenerating health in games like Halo and later on in COD games. Here the game seems to cross between earlier FPS games like Doom, with a variety of enemies, versus the notion of variation through the same enemy type with different firearms or abilities, etc. This sort of enemy setup is something you could see more in games like COD later on because of the military setting. What I mean by this is facing off against squads of military soldiers with different types of weapons. Now, not to say I didn't like these encounters, I did, and the level design combined with the AI of the enemies helped to create challenging moments. As I mentioned earlier, the main type of enemy you encounter is basically like a soldier. In between all of this is the sort of enemy types you'd seen in more classic FPS shooters. Here you get to see a lot more interesting enemy design, such as cyber ninjas with stealth camo and melee attacks, or more powerful armoured type enemies who accompany the squads of soldiers. I appreciated these encounters because they offered a lot of variety to the usual encounters of soldiers. There's some parts of the game where you encounter these automatic turrets, which made me wonder whether they got the idea from the first Half-Life game. From my initial playthrough, I've noticed a couple of things that I think may have been ahead of their time when this game was developed in the mid-2000s. So one example could be seen in my opinion the way you're able to lean with your gun, left or right. That seems ahead of its time to me. Another thing that popped up was the use of these answering machines as logs almost. It seems like that was later on borrowed by BioShock in the way it did its narration. Again, in my opinion. Going back to Half-Life again, I wonder whether this game got some sort of ideas about the distinction between soldiers and then non-human enemies. Because you see this sort of panning out in the game, but maybe that's just a coincidence. Whether or not this was intentional, the game to me seems to have acted like a sort of bridge between classic FPS and the games we'd see later on like COD. As with Max Payne and its momentum being created through its excellent use of narration and plot, I would say that F.E.A.R does the same thing through its use of horror and mood and tone. Again, I want to mention the horror and dark mood of this game because it really stood out and grabbed me. And that really surprised me because this game is, as I say, nearly 20 years old. And it still works now as well, in my opinion, as it did when the game first came out.